From Royal Communications Corporation, 5 minutes news about Liberia, Africa, and our world. Today is Tuesday, January 6th, 2026, and I'm Timothy Airlines. Liberian Senate 3,004 reform bills against President Joseph Boakai previous veto as government affiliate and political committee to him in Costa alleges pro tem Yumikanga Lawrence for pursuing self-interest. Agent of Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency Myron Swan accuses the agency acting director, Sarah Piago, of assaulting him for a napkin of LDA Public Relations Department describes their session as false and misleading. And also in the news tonight, the Peace Prize laureate Lehman Bowie describes jail ex-President Charles Taylor administration as total fear, intimidation, and against the regime. Away from home, President Donald Trump says the U.S. oil industry to be up and running with increased operations in Venezuela in 18 months after a surprise military operation removed President Nicolas Maduro from power. Central African Republic President Festo Alkin Teodora has won a third term after securing an override majority in last month's presidential election. Provisional results show. This was the news bulletin. Voices of those making the news at our package. We'll take a short break to be right back. Welcome back at this juncture. We join Colonel Johnson with the news bulletin.
In defiance of President Joseph Boakai veto, which many critics term as intensifying a growing constitutional and political confrontation over the control and structure and future of Liberia's maritime governance system, according to Front Page Africa publication. Before the repassage vote, the Jones Committee informed the plenary that President Joseph Boakai's objections were largely limited to issues of nomenclature and formatting, including the table of contents, an assessment that criticized significantly minimize the depth and substance of the concerns raised in the veto message. Many believe that Senate's action signals a reform legislative resolve to dismantle the National Port Authority and replace it with a new regulatory and decentralized port management regime, despite sustained objections from the president and strong legal warnings from the Ministry of Justice. In repassed legislation, two interrelated measures, including the Liberia Sea and Inland Ports Regulatory Authority Act of 2024 and the Liberia Sea and Inland Ports Decentralization and Modernization Act of 2024, are enforced of acted. The acts repealed the National Port Authority Act, dissolved the National Port Authority, and established four autonomous seaports in Monrovia, Buchanan, Greenville, and Harper, and at the same time create a new Liberia Sea and Inland Ports Regulatory Authority with expensive oversight responsibilities over ports and maritime activities across the country. The bills were introduced in the Senate by Grand Bassa County Senator and Pro Tem Kanga Lawrence, with their review and consideration handed by a joint committee of the Senate led by Maserati County Senator Sir Joseph, chair of the Transport Committee, and Sano County Senator Augustine Chi, chair of the Judiciary Committee. Meanwhile, government affiliate Harry Costa has accused Senate Pro Tem Nyambi Kanga Lawrence of pursuing self-interest bills for Liberal port sector reform. Costa, a perceived fronting political commentator, says the Pro Tem is bent on self-serving and foreign-driven interests rather than for the decentralization and efficiency of post systems in Liberia. In a Facebook Live Tuesday, Costa alleged that Pro Tem Kanga Lawrence pushed to restructure Liberia's port governance reflects past controversial concession agreement, including the long criticized APN terminus deal at the Freeport of Monrovia, which he said weaken national control and disadvantage the country. He argued that the proposed structure would divert 10% of total put revenues nationwide to fund the new agency, a move he described as financially reckless and institutionally dangerous to the country's food sector. Costa noted that the motivation behind the port is also to concession them to foreign companies, creating chaos in all of the ports across the country, like European terminal equipment. Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency officer in charge, Azaro Biago, Special Aid Agent Myron Swen, has accused him of punching his eye for allowing his uncle to take napkin that is normally kept in his vehicle. According to Swen, his immediate supervisor, Biago, physically assaulted him in a vehicle during an official trip to Nima County, leaving him with a painful eye injury. The LDA agent told reporters days after the incident that the agency has overseen action against appeared premeditated, noting that he previously threatened him or he was previously threatened by his younger brother of the LDA acting head, who is also an agent of the LDA. However, in response to allegations of the Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency, denied their assertion, describing it as false, misleading, and completely unfounded. A statement issued by LDU Tuesday said, at no time did the acting director inflict harm, issue threats, or engage in any form of assault or intimidation against any officer. The LDU Drug Enforcement Agency press statement added that the alleged incident did not occur as reported, adding that the agency believes that Myron Swain is being teleguided with the sole intent of undermining the gains the LDA continues to make in the fight against illicit drugs in Liberia. In another development, the Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency has suspended two of its officers for publicly assaulting the female who claim is a drug suspect on Tuesday versus social media platforms were saying folders and video evidence of two LDA officers identified as Solomon Gondo and Faith Willie assaulting the female officer or suspect. However, in a press statement issued hours after the incident, the Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency condemns their action, describing it as unacceptable and indirect violations of the agency's code of conduct, which strictly prohibits assault, abuse, and inhuman treatment of any person. The LDA statement noted that the officers were involved or who were involved have been immediately disrobed and turned over to the Board of Internal Inquiry and Professional Standards for investigations and appropriate disciplinary actions. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Lema Bowie has sharply criticized Liberia's dual ex-president Charles Taylor administration, describing it as a gangster regime. According to all, the Taylor administration was marked by total fear, intimidation, and bad governance, which caused the country destruction rather than development. She at the same time rejected claims that the Taylor era brought order and stability in Liberia, arguing that the Taylor regime power was exercised through fear rather than institutions. The Nobel Peace Prize laureate also recounted how citizens' lives were placed under total danger, especially at checkpoints and during encounters with security forces. She added that protests against the government were visually impossible under the administration, what she described as authoritarian regime, noting that one of the Liberia's major gains since the end of the Civil War is freedom of expression. Madam Bowie, however, urged Liberians, particularly the youth, to maximize freedom of speech and desist forms of abusing it for the caution politicians and political leaders against abusing power for personal gains. She made the remarks during an interview on Truth FM Tuesday. Nimba County Senator Samia Koga has called for unity among the citizens of Nimba County ahead of the 2029 general elections. Appearing on the social media talk show Tuesday, Senator Kogan urged all stakeholders within NIMA to put their political differences aside and unite for the common good of the county. According to him, the current political division among stakeholders, citizens, including local chiefs, will not help the county, but rather bring fermented chaos among citizens ahead of the 2029 elections. He urged local leaders and chiefs to stop putting aside or to stop putting aside people who are not in their political line, but rather bring them together and avoid what he described as self-political ambition. The Nima County Senator noted that Nima County is a common denominator for every Nima County citizen, and as such, putting aside other political reasons will only harm the county than bringing peace among the citizens. Senator Koga further called on local leaders, stakeholders, and chiefs to form a way of peace for the growth of the county. Former President George Weah has provided clarity on the Chinese government's suspension of the construction of two overhead bridges during its administration. The former president attributed the suspension of geopolitical tensions between China and the United States in 2018 during a former or Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit in Beijing. The Chinese government announced several development projects in Liberia, including the construction of two overhead bridges aimed at easing traffic congestions around the ministerial complex and along the SKD Boulevard. According to Via, his administration has completed all the required documentation for the bridge construction, but declined to become entangled in international political disputes. Weah added that the Chinese government was seeking Liberia's involvement in what he described as broader political disagreements with the United States, an approach he said his administration firmly rejected. He further explained that his administration decisions were guided by Liberia's long-standing historical ties and shared values with the United States of America. The former Liberian leader emphasized Liberia's traditional diplomatic stance of neutrality, noting that the country maintains cordial and cooperative relations with both global partners or powers. The Supreme Motorcycle and Transport Union of Liberia is calling for immediate dissolution of the Ministry of Information for allegedly failing to carry out its constitutional responsibilities. Addressing the press conference Monday, Press Union of Press Union, as the president of the union, Chokon Gray, urged the national legislature to ensure the Ministry of Information is dissolved. The Ministry of Information was established by an act of the National Legislature in 1965 with the mandate to disseminate factual information about the government activities and to serve as the principal link between the government, the media, and the general public. He also accused Information Minister Jeremy Matthew Pia and his deputies of undermining the integrity and reputation of the ministry. According to Gray, the ministry under the United Party-led government has deviated from its core mandate and has allegedly become a platform for the use of profound language and attacks against opposition political figures and other prominent members of the society. The US president at the same time cautioned President Joseph Waka against highlighting projects such as the painting of buildings, police booths, and the repair of implements as major developmental achievements in his upcoming State of the Nation address. Liberia on Monday joined members of the United Nations Security Council to call for immediate release of Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro, who was recently arrested by the United States government during an emergency meeting at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Liberia's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Louis Brown, who spoke on behalf of the A3 countries, called for restraint. The Liberian diplomat urged all parties to de-escalate tensions and adhere strictly to international laws. He emphasized the need for peaceful and political resolutions in the U.S.-Venezuela saga. The A3 countries comprising Liberia, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo statement also supported the position of the African Union, which calls for respect for Venezuela's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the principle enshrined in the United Nations Charter. Ambassador Brown also warned that continued stability in Venezuela could have broader consequences for regional and global peace and security. And Grand Bassa County District 2 Representative Clarence Banks has accused former local authorities of his district of massive corruption during the administration of former President George Weah. Addressing journalists Tuesday, Representative Banks noted that upon taking office in 2024, he invited the General Auditing Commission to conduct a survey in District Number 2, which he said uncovered serious financial mismanagement by the district authorities. According to him, information gathered revealed that funds provided by companies for development projects in District 2 during the Ria-led government was misused and failed to translate into meaningful development for the people. The Grand Bassa County lawmaker, however, praised the Assets Recovery Committee for honoring his request and compelling the affected local authorities to restitute the mismanaged funds, stressing that no amount of money is too small when it's not used for its internal purpose. Representative Banks said the move is aimed at promoting transparency, accountability, and genuine development in Grand Bassa County. The news bulletin is back to you, Shaman Dio, for the continuation of King's News Brown.
Colinius Johnson with the News Bulletin. The News Bulletin is a regular feature on King's News Broom. A reminder you're listening to King's News Broom, 45 minutes news about Liberia, Africa, and our own world. Stories we following tonight. Liberian Senate repasses put reform bills against President Joseph Boakai previous veto as government affiliate and political committee to Henry Costa alleges pro tem Nyomlikanga Lawrence of pursuing self-interest. Agent of Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency, Maron Soin, accuses the agency acting director, Fitzgerald Biago, of assaulting him for a napkin. But LDEA Public Relations Department describes their section as false and misleading. In the news tonight, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Limon Bowie describes jail ex-President Charles Taylor administration as total fear, intimidation, and gangster regime. Away from home, President Donald Trump says the U.S. oil industry could be up and running with increased operations in Venezuela within 18 months after a surprise military operation removed President Nicolas Maduro from power. Central African Republic President Festus Change Adura has won a third term after securing an outright majority in last month's presidential election. Provisional results show. We take a break to be back with voices of the newsmakers. Welcome back and thanks for being there. Government affiliate Henry Costa has accused Senate Pro Tem Kanga Lawrence of pursuing self-interest built for Liberia post-sector reform. Costa, because he flaunted political commentators, says the Pro Tem is being self-serving and foreign-driven interest rather than for the decentralization and efficiency of all systems in Liberia. In a Facebook Live video, Costa alleged that Pro Tem Yombi Kanga Lawrence's push to restructure Liberia's governance reflects past controversial concession arrangements, including the long criticized APM terminal at the Freeport of Monrovia, which he said weakened national control and disadvantaged the country.
Senator Yomli Kanga Lawrence has proudly and openly sponsored, campaigned for, lobbied for a bill or two bills seeking to supposedly decentralize the ports of our country. The free port of Monrovia, the Greenville port, the port in Harper, and the Buchanan port. You all know that. She's been involved with that. And they're trying to have us believe that their objective for doing this is to decentralize the ports, which, as if to say, in itself singularly, would then make these ports cash cows, turn them into cash cows, generating millions and millions of dollars just like that by themselves. And that is what she would have you believe. But today, I want to present to you the evidence, the facts, the real motivations, the real reasons driving Youngle's very diligent efforts to fragment, to disintegrate, to bring chaos to the whole port system in our country. Why she's doing it? This has absolutely nothing to do with simply decentralizing. Nothing. And I couldn't sit down much longer to allow this lie that Yumbi is trying to tell you, feed us, that she's doing this to decentralize the ports so that the ports can be effective. I need to tell you. You all know I don't speak often, but sometimes you just have to break your silence so people know what's going on. And that is the reason for me doing this today. It's a lie. It's a malicious lie. She is trying to do something completely different. And I have the facts. I have all the evidence here. Everything. I will present you pictures. I will post some of these pieces of evidence so you know the real reason Yombli Kanda Lawrence, somebody who has benefited from our political support consistently over the years, is trying to do the same thing that the likes of Edwin Snow and Robert Salif did with the free port of Monrovia, that today we've been dealing for more than 10 years with APM terminals. You all know how it has been, those of you who use the port of Monrovia, you know how APM terminal has turned out not to be a good deal until one of the ringleaders in helping to get the APM terminals due passed, Edwin Melvin Snow, went on radio and publicly apologized. That is exactly what Yombli is trying to do. Fragment the ports and then concession out the Buchanan port to a foreign company. I have the company here. I have pictures of Yombli's people meeting with these people. I have everything here, including her family members and all.
Then Costa was speaking. Barbara Drug Enforcement Agency officer in charge, Jara Biago Special Aid Agent Baron Swain, has accused him of punching his eye for allowing his uncle fake napkin that is normally kept in his vehicle. According to Swain, his immediate supervisor, Biago, physically assaulted him in a vehicle during a featured trip to Nimba County, leaving him with a painful eye injury. The LDA agent told reporters days after the incident that the agency ORC action against him appeared premeditated.
So, upon demand, they began the ORC case, the protector to receive it. So, I stood at the back of the then Piago said, give it to me. He also already said, give it to me. I said, no. It's my company there. We are going to make a statement. He said, anything that will happen to you, that you should take it. This is the relative. Anything that will happen to you, take it. Then in that process, a Boston drone all the top. I called Boston. I said, Boston, listen to me. I will put them down one day for provoking me. Then the milk can take our picture, one black in the other, when they take we are primarily for. What do you expect me for? Get you spending the every time you go. I said, no, what do you expect for? Because you feel a brother like OIC and I give you administration money. But I give you administration. So that part left. While discussing, the second mayor brought everybody handcuffed up again. Handcuffed again, then so they struck the kingdom of chief. I beg you, where was he going to help the? Then I told the city we are talking about there. I contrasted the as a chief. I can't be here. When say me call me as a chief, I cannot be in Tapenta. My daughter was Tapenta and fighting drugs and people crying for handcuff. What I would do on behalf of my director general and all of the I will be sending my own personal cough, which I did. The same year, pray for me. Everybody say, "Man, thank you." Then they always say, "Man, thank you, do well for," because we can't live for him tomorrow and go back home. Yeah, I said, "Well, since I gave my call for my director, when I come to Morovia, I will buy my personal cough." Granted. So what to eating everything? What the other Biagos, what the other men speak in any sighting a minute matter of those. While going to the car, then Biagos said, "Where the hold the body rest in?" I said, "Oh, gee, I don't know." They said, "We can't go for everything. Why people you too dull, you too stupid?" So I kept quiet. I said, "No." They go, "I see like business, I see too stupid." I said, "No problem." After that issue, when we enter the car, so Biagos said he want to go see one of us on the west side. So we drove 5 minutes. I got that open the door for him. Then finally said, "Well, right there." Then we left the female officer in the car and the driver. Then while walking, they are going to use the remark, say, "I will push you behind your neck." That's there. I tell them, I said, "But driver, why will you push me behind my neck?" The boss man. Yes, for why will you push me behind my neck? They will keep quiet. We kept quiet. We went to the man's site. The man who spent the horse. They said the man who came. So he said, "Go tell Joseph to bring the car back." I went to Joseph and bring the car back. But then there's something going upset or I don't know. Not my issue. So we go in the car. We moved from the office to the junction. They are going to ask me, "Where is the napkin in the car?" There I spoke. I said, "Your older uncle took the napkin. Before I could turn, they are going to give me 30 left push straight in my eye." Papa said,
He is an agent of the Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency, Baron Soin, that accusing the agency officer in charge, First Jara Biako. Meanwhile, in response to the allegations, the Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency has denied their section describing it as false, misleading, and completely unfounded. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Limon Bowie has sharply criticized Liberia jail ex-president Charles Taylor administration, describing it as gangster regime. According to her, the Taylor administration was marked by total fear, intimidation, and bad governance, which caused the country destruction rather than development. She at the same time rejected claims that the Taylor era brought order and stability in Liberia, arguing that during the Taylor regime, power was exercised through fear rather than institutions.
defiance of the president, defiance of the state. We live under an authoritarian regime. Don't let anybody, unless people were too young to understand. Taylor was not a joke. His boss was not a joke. You ever drove a car? I don't know how old you are. During Taylor's regime, you coming close to the checkpoint, flash your light. They were flooded. Let me give that all of you for putting our light in there. There was no system. It was a gangster regime. The mere fact that I can sit on here and express my thought, they're not worried that when I walk outside 80, you will be there to beat the hell out of me, what they feel like. Let's not take things for granted. And it started from Ellis. Let's just say Julie Bryant. When the Indian government took over, people, freedom of expression. Don't take it for a joke because I travel to spaces and places where people can't speak. Even if the countries are developed, you dare not go on radio to castigate the president cause, man cause, like some of the things that I will see, it started from Elliot and from Bryant all the way to President Bush at time. As bad as we think it is, our sense of community. And I'm saying all of these things to you because these are the things that I track.
Nobel Peace Prize laureate Lima Bowie speaking. You might be listening to King's Newsroom, 45 minutes news about Liberia, Africa, in our one word. Curiosity following tonight, Liberian Senate passes quote reform built against President Joseph Boakai previous veto as government affiliate and political commentator Henan Costa alleges pro-tem Yumli Kanga Lawrence offers for in self-interest. Agent of Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency Maron Swain accuses the agency acting director, Fitzgerald Biago, of assaulting him for a napkin. But LDA Public Relations Department describes their section as false and misleading. And also in the news, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Lemon Bowie describes jail ex-president Charles Taylor administration as total fear, intimidation against the regime. Away from home, President Donald Trump says the U.S. oil industry could be up and running with increased operations in Venezuela within 18 months after a surprise military operation removed President Nicolas Maduro from power. Central African Republic President Faustin Archange Theodora has won a third term after securing an outright majority in last month's presidential election, provisional results show. We take a break to be back with more voices. Welcome back and thanks for being there. Nimba County Senator Samuel Koga has called for unity among citizens of the county ahead of the 2029 general and presidential elections. Appearing on social media Factual Tuesday, Senator Koga urged all stakeholders within Nimba to put their political differences aside and unite for the common good of the county. According to him, the current political division among stakeholders, citizens, including local chiefs, will not help the county but rather bring fragmented chaos among citizens ahead of the 2029 elections.
I'm taking side with the president currently of the old man now. So if a double father at this time, you understand, can champion that, it means that Jesus Baba is peaceful and you bring it there together. So in Lima, we the stakeholder now, we gotta put our ambition aside, our bigotry or whatsoever aside, and believe that Lima is our common denominator to unite and take sure they have two house and sort out our differences. But when we are fragmented, where those that need authority and the local authority and others are taking one side, mind you, why is it so that you are in local authorities, you may be paramount chief, you may be clan chief, that you're taking instruction from local authorities, authorities. There are many people down there that feel that they will not listen to paramount chief or clan chief in the future. They will take different side. So they never know what I know. People who take this side now who refer themselves to this different group that try to denigrate other people and look down on other people. That even going to the stand and say, well, at this time we need to suppress them when election coming near we get to them. You're making big mistake. Like, it's a very big mistake you're making because some of all are tested. Some of all were in refugee life who broke Canada to live. And then graciously God gave us the opportunity that was serving the position that were more and we were able to have them for on to our houses. And I think they're moving. We need to unite and we need to pull taking this side out. They will not have.
Neighbor County Senator Samuel Koga. Grand Bassa County District 2 Representative Clarence Banks has accused former local officials of his district of massive corruption during the administration of former President George Weah. Addressing journalists Tuesday, Representative Banks noted that upon taking office in 2024, he invited the General Auditing Commission to conduct a survey in District 2, which he said uncovered serious financial mismanagement by district authorities.
I asked them when I took over in 2024 to please do a complete audit of projects that were allotted to my district by the government for my citizens under the George Weah administration. Unfortunately, none of those projects was done. It was not completed. Some you have not even seen the track of people being on that site. I did an independent study, and some of the bridges that were to be built were not built, although the government had given contractors thousands. I thank the GSC because there is no amount of money that is small when it is misused, mismanaged, and if it is taken to be a personal asset when the citizens are suffering. I will take this time also to thank the Asset Recovery Honorable Councillor Martin, who also accepted my letter to please recover funds that were taken by district leaders under the assumption from companies that was intended for development purposes for the citizen of District 2. Or if we can recall, sometimes in 2024, a case in the Grand Bassa County Court where $38,000 was taken.
Grand Bassa County District 2 Representative Clarence Banks. Former President George Weah has provided clarity on the Chinese government suspension of the construction of two overhead bridges during his administration. The former president attributed the suspension to geopolitical tensions between China and the United States. We'll bring you the except in our subsequent newscast. The Supreme Motorcycle and Transport Union of Liberia is calling for immediate dissolution of the Ministry of Information for allegedly failing to carry out its constitutional responsibilities. Addressing a press conference Monday, President of the Union, Trogan Grade, urged the National Legislature to ensure the Ministry of Information is dissolved. He also accused Information Minister Joe Lemick Pia and his deputies of undermining the integrity and reputation of the ministry.
Supreme Motorcycle Transport Union of Liberia call on the national legislature with the full support of President Joseph Imam Baka Sr. to dissolve the Ministry of Information and ask President Baka not to mention the following in the 2026 SONA message scheduled for the third working Monday of January, which include heating of building, police booth, hair pumps, and the most talked about $22 million to renovate or rehabilitate all major roads. They call it for flat of a presidential achievement, reading through the act creating both LBS and MOI. I'm kindly recommending to the government to dissolve the information ministry and combine their staff or employee with LBS staff are not professional and lack everything it takes to disseminate government policies, programs, and news. They got appointed by President Waka. They have turned the entire Ministry of Information into the Ministry of
Supreme Motorcycle and Transport Union of Liberia President Chokon Gray. Back to this development, former President George Weah has provided clarity on the Chinese government suspension of the construction of two overhead bridges during his administration. The former president attributed the suspension to geopolitical tensions between China and the United States.
The discussion that the Chinese government face now is something that will come together. Those people believe that simply because they gave you something, so we'll get involved, we want to go Palestine. I was the president that said no. If they charge you for human rights, then discuss it. You cannot, Liberia will not come to the middle. Because Liberia is a partner to America, and Liberia is a partner to you. That's what you're fighting. That will come. Some myself, but then while we're talking, we'll suspend what we say won't do well for later on. And later on, we're not there. So it's the same. Nothing new. Nothing new. That they show anything new. They show anything new. Next election, we're going to vote against it. All the law, we're going to the police station, all the vote against us.
Former President George Weah there speaking. Liberia on Monday joined members of the United Nations Security Council to call for immediate release of Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro, who was recently arrested by the United States government. During an emergency meeting at UN headquarters in New York, Liberia's permanent representative to the UN Ambassador Louis Brown, who spoke on behalf of the A3 countries, called for restraint.
As our flag, the Lone Star, is installed in these halls, we mark more than a ceremonial change. It is a defining moment in Liberia's national journey and a reflection of President Boykai's enduring belief that peace is both a privilege and certainly a duty. Through commitment to democracy, institutional reforms, and national reconciliation, Liberia has met the challenge. More than 22 years after the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, Liberia stands peaceful, democratic, and stable. Our flag now flies here not as a symbol of recovery, but as a symbol of responsibility and a testament of our readiness to serve. After 65 years, Liberia returns to the Security Council through its first full elected mandate.
Liberia permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Louis Brown. Away from home, Central African Republic President Feston Achange Touadera has won a third term after securing an outright majority in last month's presidential election, provisional results show. The 68-year-old mathematics professor was widely expected to win after the main opposition coalition boycotted the poll, citing concerns about electoral fairness. Touadera campaigned on his security record in the chronically unstable nation after rebels seized power in 2013, a crisis that led the government to enlist support from Russian mercenaries and Rwanda soldiers. He has faced heavy criticism after a 2023 constitution removed term limits, allowing him to keep running for office. And President Donald Trump says the UN oil industry could be up and running with increased operations in Venezuela within 18 months after a surprise military operation removed President Nicolas Maduro from power. Trump told NBC News that a tremendous amount of money would have to be spent, and the oil companies will spend it, and the oil companies will spend it, and then they will get in or reimbursed by us or through revenue. Representatives from major U.S. petroleum companies plan to meet the Trump administration later this week, BBC partners NBC News reported. Well, on that note, that's how we come to the end of this edition of King's News Broom. But before we leave, a quick reminder of stories we followed in the headlines. Liberian Senate repasses pulled reform bills against President Joseph Boakai's previous veto as government affiliate and political commentator Henry Costa alleges pro-tem Yomle Kanga Lawrence of pursuing self-interest. Agent of Liberia Drug Enforcement Agency Marion Swain accuses the agency acting director Jara Biago of assaulting him for a napkin, but LDA Public Relations Department describes the assertion as false and misleading. You also heard in the news Nobel Peace Prize laureate Nima Bowie describes jailed ex-president Charles Taylor administration as total fear, intimidation against the regime. Away from home, President Donald Trump says the U.S. oil industry could be running and up with increased operations in Venezuela within 18 months after a surprise military operation removed President Nicolas Maduro from power. Central African Republic President first in charge Touadera has won a third term after securing an outright majority in last month's presidential election, provisional results shows. Many thanks to our reporters, correspondents, and all those who helped making this edition of King's Newsroom a success. Colinius Johnson brought you the news bulletin. Frank Diallo Swen sat at control and handled the technical aspect of this edition. On behalf of the team, I'm Shema Dale. I presented. Thanks for listening and watching.